If you work 8 hours a day, but feel like you only produce 2, your brain isn't tired. It's chemically sabotaged. Most people think productivity is about discipline. I spent weeks digging through neuroscience and decision-making research to understand why some people stay busy all day but move nothing forward. And it turns out, it's not about effort. It's about a hidden brain glitch almost nobody sees. In this video, I'll show you what it is, why it traps smart people the most, and how to fix it starting today. Let's break it down.
I want you to visualize a typical day in your life. You arrive at your desk at 9 a.m. You have a clear plan. You are going to finish that big project. You are motivated. You open your laptop, but before you start, you check your email, just for a second. You see a message from your boss. You reply. Then, a notification pops up on Slack. A colleague has a question. You answer it. While you are typing, your phone buzzes. A WhatsApp message. You check it. You go back to your project, but you realize you forgot a file. You search for it. Suddenly, it is 12 p.m. You have been working for 3 hours. You have been busy every single second. Your brain feels fried. You are exhausted. But when you look at your project, nothing has happened. The cursor is blinking on a blank page. You end the day feeling drained, anxious, and deeply confused. You ask yourself, I worked so hard today. Why did I produce nothing? You tell yourself you are just tired. You tell yourself you need more coffee. But you don't need coffee. You need a detox. Because biologically speaking, the way you are working right now is doing more damage to your brain than if you had stayed up all night smoking marijuana. You are not multitasking. You are engaging in a form of cognitive self-harm that scientists have proven makes you temporarily stupid. You are suffering from a biological glitch called attention residue, and it is the reason why you can work for 8 hours and only produce 2 hours of value. Welcome to the Missing Rule, Chapter 2, The Intoxication of Distraction. To understand the scale of the damage, we have to look at a study that shocked the corporate world. In 2005, Dr. Glenn Wilson at the University of London conducted an experiment commissioned by Hewlett-Packard. He wanted to measure the impact of infomania, the constant interruption of emails and phone calls, on human intelligence. He took a group of workers and tested their IQ while they were working in a quiet, focused environment. Then he tested them again while they were being bombarded with digital distractions. The results were terrifying. The distracted workers didn't just slow down, their cognitive capacity collapsed. On average, their IQ dropped by 10 points. To put that number in perspective, let's look at other things that lower your IQ. Losing an entire night of sleep, staying awake for 24 hours, drops your IQ by about 10 points. Smoking cannabis drops your IQ by about 4 points. Read that again. Sitting at your desk, checking your email every 10 minutes makes you more than twice as cognitively impaired as someone who is currently high on drugs. You would never show up to a meeting drunk. You would never try to write a report while stoned. But you show up to work every day with your notifications on, your tabs open, and your phone on the desk. You are voluntarily entering a state of digital intoxication. And the scary part is, you don't feel it. Dr. Wilson found that unlike a drunk person who knows they are drunk, a multitasker thinks they are being productive. The dopamine hits from the notifications mask the cognitive decline. You feel busy, you feel important, but your brain is misfiring. You are operating with the mental capacity of an exhausted 8-year-old trying to do the work of a professional adult. This study proved that multitasking is a lie. The human brain cannot do 2 things at once. It can only switch. And every time you switch, you pay a tax, a heavy biological tax that is paid in the currency of your attention. Chapter 3, The Time Management Lie. When I first felt this cognitive collapse, this feeling of working all day but achieving nothing, I did what everyone does. I blamed my calendar. I thought the problem was time management. I bought the planners, I downloaded the apps. I tried the Pomodoro technique. I tried time blocking. I treated my day like a game of Tetris, trying to fit every task into a perfect little slot. The gurus told me that if I could just organize my inputs, the outputs would take care of themselves. But it didn't work. In fact, it made things worse. I would schedule a writing block from 9 to 10, then a meeting block from 10 to 11, then an email block from 11 to 11:30. I was executing the schedule perfectly, but my brain felt like it was moving through mud. When I sat down to write, the words wouldn't come. When I sat down to answer emails, I made typos. I felt a low-grade anxiety humming in the background, a constant static noise that I couldn't turn off. I realized that time was not the variable I was missing. You can manage time perfectly and still be cognitively paralyzed. The problem wasn't in the clock. It was in the neural network. So I stopped listening to the productivity influencers. I stopped trying to optimize my calendar. I went back to the source code. I started digging into the archives of cognitive psychology and organizational behavior. I wanted to know what happens to the human brain when it is forced to shift gears rapidly. I wanted to know the biological cost of switching. And in a 2009 paper titled "Why Is It So Hard to Do My Work?" published by Dr. Sophie Leroy at the University of Minnesota, I found the missing rule. I found the name of the ghost that had been haunting my desk for years. Chapter 4. The Mechanism of Residue. Dr. Sophie Leroy wasn't interested in time. She was interested in attention. She proposed a radical theory. Human attention is not a spotlight that you can instantly snap from one object to another. It is not light. It is liquid. It is viscous. It is thick. It is sticky. When you pour honey from a jar and then you stop pouring, the honey doesn't stop instantly. A thick trail continues to drip. It lingers. Leroy discovered that your attention works exactly the same way. She conducted a series of experiments where she gave participants a task. Let's call it Task A. She let them work on it. Then she interrupted them and forced them to switch to Task B. She measured their brain activity. She measured their performance. She discovered a phenomenon she called attention residue. Here is the mechanism. When you switch from writing a report, Task A, to checking a Slack message, Task B, your brain does not fully disengage from Task A. A significant portion of your cognitive processing power, your cognitive RAM, remains stuck on the first task.
It is still processing the unfinished sentence. It is still holding the structure of the report in the working memory. So, when you open the Slack message, you are not looking at it with 100% of your brain. You are looking at it with maybe 60% of your brain. The other 40% is left behind, like a ghost, haunting the previous tab. This creates a state of cognitive split. You are physically present in the new task, but neurologically, you are straddling two worlds. And the tragedy is that this residue doesn't clear instantly. If you check your email for just 30 seconds, that residue lingers. It stays there for minutes, clogging up your processing power. Now, imagine you do this every 10 minutes. Email, residue. Slack, residue. Phone call, residue. Talking to a colleague, residue. By 2 p.m., your brain is not processing anything. It is just a graveyard of residues. You have layered so many half-finished cognitive loops on top of each other that your prefrontal cortex is effectively suffocated. Dr. Leroy found something even more disturbing. She found that the residue is thickest when Task A is incomplete. The human brain has a desperate need for cognitive closure. It hates open loops. If you interrupt a task before it is finished, which we do dozens of times a day, the brain actively fights against the switch. It clings to the old task, screaming, "We aren't done yet." This explains the zombie employee phenomenon. You are busy, you are moving, but you are operating with a fractured mind. You miss details, you make bad decisions, you struggle to find words. Not because you are stupid, but because you are trying to run a high-performance operating system with 20 heavy programs running in the background, spinning the rainbow wheel of death. You are paying a switching tax on every single action you take. And you might think, okay, so I lose a little focus. It takes me a minute to get back. No big deal. But the data shows it is not a minute. Chapter 5, the 23-minute tax. You might be thinking, okay, so I lose a little focus. So what? I check my email, I lose a few seconds, I get back to work. I'm fast. I can handle it. This is the most expensive lie in the modern economy. You believe the cost of an interruption is the time it takes to read the notification. You think it takes 10 seconds to read a text, so I lost 10 seconds. But biology doesn't work like a stopwatch. Biology has inertia. In 2008, Dr. Gloria at the University of California, Irvine put a number on this cost. She tracked knowledge workers in real time, minute by minute, measuring exactly how long it took them to return to their original level of focus after an interruption. The number she found is staggering. It is not 1 minute. It is not 5 minutes. It is 23 minutes and 15 seconds. Let that sink in. You check a Slack message for 30 seconds. But the biological price you pay is 23 minutes of suboptimal performance. That is the time it takes for your brain to clear the residue, reload the context of the deep task, and get the engine back up to full speed. Now do the math. If you get interrupted just 3 times in an hour, which is a conservative estimate for most offices, you are mathematically incapable of ever reaching deep focus. You are spending your entire day in the recovery phase. You are permanently warming up the engine,
but never driving the car. But Dr. Mark found something even darker. She found that workers know this is happening. They feel the time slipping away. So how do they compensate? They speed up. When people are interrupted, they try to work faster to make up for the lost time. They type faster, they skim read, they rush decisions. The result is a catastrophic spike in stress. The interrupted group in the study reported significantly higher levels of frustration, anxiety, and perceived pressure. You are running your brain at red line RPMs just to maintain average output. You are burning out your nervous system, not because the work is hard, but because the switching is lethal. This is the architecture of burnout. It is not too much work, it's too much switching. You are paying a 23-minute tax on a 30-second interaction. This is the architecture of burnout. It is not too much work, it's too much switching. You are paying a 23-minute tax on a 30-second interaction. It is a bankruptcy of attention. Chapter 6. The Protocol of Closure. So, how do we stop the bleeding? We cannot go live in a cave. We cannot delete email. We have to interact with the world. But we can change how we switch. We can install a protocol that clears the residue before we move. We need to learn the art of cognitive closure. Step 1. The Ready to Resume hack. Dr. Sophie Leroy, the discoverer of attention residue, found one specific intervention that significantly reduces the damage. She found that if you simply stop working and switch, the residue is high. But if you take just 30 seconds to create a closure plan, the residue drops. Here's the protocol. Before you check that email, before you answer that call, stop. Grab a piece of paper. Write down exactly where you are and exactly what you need to do next when you return. Example: I am in the middle of paragraph 3. The next sentence needs to explain the cost of switching. By writing it down, you are offloading the data from your brain's RAM to the paper. You are telling your brain, it is safe to let go. We have saved the game state. We won't lose our place. This signals cognitive closure. Your brain relaxes. The viscosity clears. You can now switch to the new task fully present. And when you return, you don't spend 23 minutes figuring out where you were. You just read the note and re-engage. Step 2. The Deep Work Fortress. You must protect your prefrontal cortex like it is a national treasure. Neuroscientists have identified a state called transient hypofrontality. This is the state of flow. It is when the prefrontal cortex, the inner critic, the doubter, the part of you that worries, temporarily shuts down, down-regulates. This is where genius happens. This is where you write the code, design the strategy, or create the art that matters. You cannot achieve transient hypofrontality if your phone is on the desk. The mere presence of the phone, even if it is silent, drains your cognitive capacity because a part of your brain is constantly scanning it for threats. You need air-gapped blocks. Create a 90-minute block where you are physically separated from the network. No internet, no phone, door locked. You are not just working, you are inducing a different neurochemical state. You are accessing a level of intelligence that the multitaskers literally cannot reach. Step 3. Batching, the firewall. Stop treating email as a background activity. Treat it as a task. Schedule shallow work blocks. Check email at 11 a.m. and 4 p.m. Do it all at once. When you batch the distractions, you pay the switching tax only once instead of 20 times. You contain the residue in a specific container instead of letting it spill all over your day. The rule is simple: one thing at a time to completion. If you start it, finish it. If you can't finish it, write the Ready to Resume plan. Never leave a loop open. Never let the ghost of the last task haunt the current one. Chapter 7. The Fortress of Focus. We started this investigation with the image of the zombie employee, the person who is busy every second of the day, yet ends the week with nothing to show for it. We now know that this isn't a metaphor. It is a biological reality. The constant switching, the open loops, the residue clogging your cognitive gears, it is chemically equivalent to showing up to work intoxicated. The economy we live in is called the attention economy. But that name is misleading. It implies that attention is just a commodity to be traded. In reality, attention is the only currency that matters. It is the raw material of human potential. If you cannot focus, you cannot think. If you cannot think, you cannot create value. And if you cannot create value, you become replaceable. We're moving into an era where shallow work, answering emails, moving data around, reacting to notifications, will be done by algorithms. Artificial intelligence does not suffer from attention residue. It does not need 23 minutes to switch tasks. The only competitive advantage humans have left is deep work. The ability to hold a complex thought in your mind for 4 hours without breaking. The ability to enter transient hypofrontality and pull something new out of the void. This ability is becoming increasingly rare at exactly the same time it is becoming increasingly valuable.
Most people are voluntarily surrendering this power. They are training their brains to be distracted. They are wiring their neurons for shallowness. They are building a life where they are always available but never present. But you now have the schematics of the glitch. You know that multitasking is a myth designed to keep you busy and stupid. You know that the switching tax is bankrupting your potential. You have a choice. You can continue to be a router, just passing information from one screen to another, living in a permanent state of cognitive residue. Or you can build a fortress of focus. You can be the person who dares to disconnect, the person who closes the door, the person who writes the ready to resume note and clears the RAM. It will feel uncomfortable at first. The silence will feel heavy. Your dopamine receptors will scream for a notification. But on the other side of that discomfort is the clearest thinking you have ever experienced. Protect your attention like it is your lifeblood. Because it is. Do not let the world fragment you. Stay whole. Stay deep. There is always a missing rule. We just found this one. For the analytical minds who demand proof, the full intelligence dossier, including Sophie Leroy's research on attention residue, the HP study on infomania and IQ drop, and Gloria Mark's data on the switching cost, is declassified in the description below. If you are ready to focus, subscribe to the archive.